Hello everyone, welcome to Self-Knowledge. Today we're having lecture number 38 of this self-knowledge course that consists in 50 lectures that are given the information and the practices that we need so we can start our path towards the awakening of our consciousness. I always start the lectures saying, well, today's lecture is a very interesting lecture. But actually, today's lecture, it is a very hard lecture because we are going to understand why the path towards self-realization is difficult. And we are going to learn today what are the main obstacles that we are going to find in this work, and we are going to learn how to transcend them. Also, we are going to see what are the possible forms of self-deception that we can find in this path, so we learn also to avoid them. Actually, the path towards self-realization is hard, it's difficult. Without a doubt, the path that leads to enlightenment, it's not an easy path to travel. Actually, the vast majority of us, in the different existences that we already have lived, we have received the knowledge that lead us to take that inner path, the path towards self-realization. But the actual or the current state in which we find ourselves, because we're still here, asleep and lost, that let us know that this path is not an easy one, because we're still trying to take the path and to reach to the end. There are many reasons why this path is difficult. The main one, I would say, is that if we want to travel this path, we must constantly need to face and defeat ourselves. And that is the strongest word. This path is very difficult. This path is known as the path of the knife because it has dangers on one side and the other. And each step carries pain. Many people start this path, and very, very rare are those who reach the goal. But even though it is a difficult and painful path, it is undoubtedly the only one that is really worth traveling, because its end point is total liberation. It's the awakening of 100% of our consciousness. It is the return to the boson of the common cosmic Father. But now, having achieved wisdom, mastery, and having become creators, gods, to be part of the army of the voice, or the great word that resonates in the universe. So let's analyze what are those obstacles that make this path so difficult, so that we learn how to transcend those obstacles and to move always forward in this work. The first obstacle that we find in this path is our own ego, and more specifically, the dark side on ourselves that we don't know and that we don't want to accept. As I was saying, the most difficult thing is to face ourselves, decide to discover and to recognize that we are not the jewels of people that we think we are, and that we must open ourselves to discover the perversity, the degeneration that actually resides within us. We love our ego so much, we justify our mistakes, we overlook many perverse details that are manifested in us, and we reach such a point of self-deception that we actually don't see our own perversion. We barely know a very small part of ourselves. since we have a very stunted sense of self-observation because we actually don't use it. We get used to all the time looking outwards, looking for what others do, what others say, pointing, criticizing, judging what others do, without realizing that what we are looking in the other people is only what we are projecting, because we are always projecting that unknown side of us onto other people, but that we are not even willing to recognize that mistake in ourselves. And it happens that when one has many things in oneself that one doesn't know or accept, then those things complicate our lives terribly. And thanks to this, we keep attracting situations and people that generate conflicts. Since as we are not well related with ourselves, because we don't know ourselves, we will not be well related to others either. And the results will be conflicts of all kinds all the time. When we want to embark on this path to self-realization, which is undoubtedly the only path that can lead us to the enlightenment, we understand the need to observe ourselves from moment to moment. Self-observation is bringing the light of the consciousness to the dark side of ourselves. But one begins to self-observe and one begins to discover many things that one didn't even suspect that one had. One began to discover that one is a liar, treacherous, unfair, unbalanced, tyrannical, dishonest, ill-intentioned, perverse, degenerate, and to the extent that one more is bringing light towards those inner darkness, then deeper and more difficult things are being discovered within us that actually frighten and that make us want to run and want to stop looking inside. So we leave behind this work of psychological death, and we tend to decide on some other path that promises heaven or enlightenment by believing in something, by going somewhere, by consuming such substance, or by giving some amount of money. But what happens that a famous psychoanalyst used to say something that is very true. And he used to say that no one becomes enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making our own inner darkness conscious. And it is that trapped within that 97% of subconsciousness that we all have is 97% of our essence, of our consciousness. And only by observing it and only by eliminating it, we can truly rescue and we can really awaken our consciousness. If we don't decide to start this work of self-discovery through self-observation, we will spend another existence believing that we are doing well, and believing ourselves to be victims of circumstances and victims of people, seeing the perversion outside but never recognizing it within us. And that is actually the second aspect that make this path so difficult, and is the fact that we don't accept that what we criticize so much in others is something that rests on the dark side of oneself and that one doesn't know or want to recognize, because the ego is always offended when it sees its reflection. So, I will never feel the urge to change if I'm convinced that the bad guy is the other, that the pervert is the other, that the corrupt are those on the government, that I am blameless, that I'm honorable. And since we don't want even remotely to see that what bothers us so much in the other is an aspect that has not been worked in ourselves, because we don't have this slightless understanding about it. And when we don't have an understanding about something that we look in the exterior and we want to point on that, it is because we have that unsolved on ourselves. We don't have the consciousness about that psychological defect. So we get stuck on this path because we understand that we don't need to change, that the one that need to change is the other. So when we see in another something that bothers us, that generates rejection, or that we want to change in others, we must remember that law of the mirror that says that everything that bothers me, irritates me, angers me, or that I want to change in other is actually inside me. So I need to work on that inside of me. So through self-observation, we get to discover the hidden defect in our interior that we are looking outside. Because what we do, we see something on the outside that we have a concept that is bad, let's say, or that we just feel like rejection, and we have that defect inside of us, but that defect is actually like hidden in the other pole. It's like if we put a white mask on the defect and we just like put a white suit and a mask, and we all the time are hiding these defects inside us. And when we see the defect outside, the defect from the other pole is pointing, is judging, is criticizing the other, so we don't go inside ourselves and we don't change. So in that situation, every time we see something outside that is actually causing the manifestation of something that make us feel uncomfort in our interior, that is the perfect sign that is the exact psychological defect that we need to work on ourselves. The third path, or the third aspect why this path is difficult, is because this is a path full of dangers, inside and outside. When we start this path, when we want to free ourselves from the, let's say, sinister forces that want to keep us asleep, that want to keep us fascinated, to continue feeding energetically on us, and we can call that forces the black lodge, and there is an external black lodge and there is an internal black lodge. And when they notice that we want to free ourselves, then they come over us, both the external and the internal black lodge. So what is internal black lodge? It's our own psychological defects. And when they realize and when they notice that we want to free ourselves, they are going to make a war on us. They are going to generate a lot of bad will, to make the practices, to meditate, to abandon our bad habits, to achieve chastity. And also the temptations that we are going to be faced with are going to be stronger every time. Because from the strongest the temptation, the virtue that we are going to rescue is going to be also greater. So from the death of the ego, the virtues, the powers, the positive faculties of the consciousness is going to be rescued from. But we will also have external attacks. Immediately, a person stops fornicating, it starts balancing his centers and manages to light the sacred fire and receive in the astral world the small silver sword. Then the black lodge comes upon him, trying to snatch it away. try to take him to lose energy, try to make him fornicate, and that he returns to become, again, another body, entity in society. And they will come sometimes as attractive people who seek to seduce us so that we fall into temptation and that we be unfaithful to our partner, or so that we return to fornication, or they can come as people with very fascinating theories who seek to confuse us and to fascinate us, or they can come as guides, as people that is pretending to be enlightened masters to whom we have to follow in order to advance in our internal work. Or they can come as people who bring us great economic opportunities that will solve all our problems, but that will leave us without time and without energy for the work of the day. So, for that reason, when we start this path, we have to be very alert at all times, and we need to be practicing the psychological death all the time, because we must know that the external black lodge can only tempt us through our internal black lodge. And what does it mean? That if I'm eliminating from my psychology my lustful, my unfaithful, my fanatic, my mythomaniac, my intellectual, my proud, my greedy selves, etc., then they won't have a way to seduce me or to make me lose my energy or to make me lose my way. So that is something that we need to take into account, and that is important of the importance of the all the time working on the psychological death. Another big obstacle in this path, and it's really a big one, is the self-delusion. And it happens when we enter these studies, when we start looking for the awakening of consciousness, and we find something like, for example, this self-knowledge course, and we begin to feel good, and we begin to feel that we are actually doing good, that we start like feeling safe, feeling holy, feeling that we have the truth. And we learn these topics, and we believe that because we handle these topics very well, we are already better than others, and we even see them as inferior because they don't even recognize the knowledge. And it even happens that we can begin to work on ourselves, and that we actually realize that we have many psychological defects, and we realize that we must stop wasting our energy, and we start with courage to do this work. And we abandon a few vices, and we eliminate a few defects, and we begin to even teach this knowledge. And it happens that we start like entering a state of passivity. We begin to feel that we are doing very well, that we are already awakening, that we are doing what we are supposed to be doing, and we start feeling that we are doing very good. But it happens that on the inner path, when one believes that one is going very well, in reality, we are going very badly. And when one believes that one is going very badly, it happens that we are going very well. And why is that? Because when one thinks that things are going very well, it is because we have entered the path of the fanaticism and the mythomania. It's because we have lowered our guards. It is because we have stopped self-observing. We have stopped judging ourselves ruthlessly, and thus we stop to self-discover ourselves. And a person who begins to uncover his own inner darkness, to discover his own rottenness, and inner misery to rescue the light that is trapped within himself in his own darkness and that doesn't escape from it. Each time is going deeper and each time is finding more subtle and more perverse aspects of himself and is going to be discovering every time more terrible things. And that is why this work needs to be constant. And we need to know that this work does not end until it ends. At the moment in which we begin to feel good and elevated and awakened and superior to others, it is because we have entered the wrong path and we have deviated and we have taken the path of the fanaticism and the mythomania. A person who is constantly self-discovering himself will have more and more clear how much still needs to work on himself. How many things still needs to be changed within himself. Still, when we are in the work of the second mountain, the Christic force that is born within us must continue to eliminate all the dark aspect of our psychology and needs to eliminate the seven psychological, the causal selves or the seven deadly sins that originate all our ego. So feeling that we are great and that we are doing well when we have barely begun this work is actually a terrible, terrible obstacle to our progress. Another big obstacle that we find on this path are the moral codes. And in society, there are many moral codes, rules of behaviors, civil statutes, etc. And it turns out that all these moral codes on the inner path are superfluous. And many of these can become a terrible obstacles to our inner work. Conventional morality is actually useless. Morality is just a slave of customs of the time or certain place. What was moral in past ages is now immoral. What was moral, for example, in the Middle Ages, for these modern times, can be immoral. What is moral in one country is immoral in another country, and so on. So after a person begins to do the work to awaken his consciousness, he must be governed by his own consciousness, because consciousness is actually timeless. It is always objective. And in society, we find precepts that tell us that we need, for example, to study to be someone in life. That is a moral code. And following that established code, we spend large number of years in our lives in basic preparation, then high school, then university, then the postgraduate classes and the master's degree and the specialties, etc. Just to have a job, to try to get money, to get comforts, to give ourselves luxuries, to have prestige, etc. However, these are just personality objectives that will not lead us to develop anything that is permanent, that is actually objective. Since all the material achievements and all the successes that a personality can reach are actually going to be swallowed by time. Because when we die, they stay. The only thing that we are going to take with us, the only thing that transcends time, is the consciousness that we awaken. So by following the patterns so defended by the moral codes of society, we waste all the time chasing subjective things, and we don't dedicate our existence to achieving its true purpose, which is to achieve the intimate self-realization of our being, to awaken our consciousness. But this way we could actually analyze many moral codes that if the family comes first, that is one. Then we close ourselves off and we limit our loves to the family nucleus. And we forget everyone in this planet is a brother, and for that reason, we don't sacrifice ourselves for others. Or or it is established that we need to be, or we need to obey the rules of the government. And if we don't decide to always follow the dictates of our consciousness over and above what the leaders say that it is correct, then we will end up making many mistakes and that can actually even damage our own energy, as was the recent case with the issue of the vaccination. So there you can see. Another aspect that makes this path difficult is karma. We owe huge amounts of karma. Every time that we let our psychological eyes act instead of our consciousness, they generate some damage that remains as a karmic debt for us. So throughout our existences, we have harmed many people, we have committed many atrocities, and if we want to free ourselves, we must settle our accounts. The divine law is just, but it is actually also merciful, and they put us as a requirement. Sorry, that is a hard word for me. And to be able to self-realize that we need to pay the pending karma for the last 7 existences. Therefore, on this path towards self-realization, we will always be paying karma. And every time we eliminate a psychological defect, we must pay the karmic debt that defect has. The importance of living constantly working in favor of humanity, to be constantly generating the dharma that will allow us to pay for our karmas with love, so we don't have to pay for them with pain. But sometimes the dharma that we make will not be enough, and we'll have to go through moments of crisis, illness, pain, and difficult situations. But we must be clear and aware that we are paying all our karmas. So for that reason, it is important to be carrying out every day the transfer of funds practice and the practice of the negotiation with the law that we learned in lecture number 13. So we are daily paying for our karmas, so that the pain of karma don't get us stuck on the path. Let's see, another obstacle in this path is pseudo-esotericism. In pseudo-esotericism, we have many paths that promise to lead us to higher goals through, let's say, contacting spirits or aliens, or taking mystical drugs, or consulting shamans, sorcerers, masters, or through the development of faculties, or through beliefs. So we are going to find multiple paths that actually don't lead anywhere. Some of them even lead to abyss and to despair. There are paths that have the objective of taking us towards the nirvana and converting us into majesties of such sons of the universe, but that in no way are going to take us towards a self-realization. And we must really have our eyes wide open, since there are very fascinating paths of the most holy appearance, ineffable, but that unfortunately can only lead us to involution. Actually, if the path is not taking us into ourselves, if the path is not taking us to a rescue all the consciousness that is currently trapped within all our psychological defects, if the path is not taking us to create our existential bodies of the being through the wise use of our sexual energy, and if the path is not taking us to develop conscious love for humanity, but it is taking us to believe in something else, to wait for someone that is going to save us, etc. We have that is not the correct path. And finally, among the obstacles that we are going to find on this path are the trials to which the initiate is constantly subjected in this path. When one enters the path of initiation, and we start that path when we ignite our sacred fire, when we receive our small silver sword, then one is already starting to work, and a series of terrible trials come to us because they have to test the initiate in every way to see if he actually deserves to continue climbing or not. We are going to be tested daily, and it is a rigorous discipline. And to do well in these trials, the psychological work of the ongoing death is essential. They are going to give us trials of earth, water, air, and fire. And we are going to experience those trials both in the physical world and in the astral world. With this test, we are going to be measured by wisdom, by rectitude, and love. With which we can face the different difficult situations, for example, in the economy, or to see if we are capable of or incapable of adapting to the different hard situations in life, or to see how we face the loss of something or of someone, or how we deal with situations where lust or anger arises. So if we despair, if we don't know how to adapt to the different situations, if we react negatively, if we don't pass the trials, and then we get stuck along the way if we don't pass these constant trials. There are moments of trial in which we feel alone, in which we feel like if our inner being have abandoned us, that we ask and we don't receive an answer. And these are only trials, and they are testing our capacity to follow the path that we already have. And as we have seen, this is a path with many dangers and many obstacles, and it is necessary to know all these obstacles to know how to transcend them, so we don't get stuck in this path, so we don't lose another existence trying to reach the self-realization. And actually, when we find ourselves in the most difficult moments of this work, in the moments of maximum sufferings and conscious sacrifices, after choosing the direct path during the creation of the causal body, the Christ will be born within us. And although the Christ is that revolutionary force that will come to help us and that will do the work of the second mountain, which is the apocalypse within us, his arrival actually is marking the beginning of the real hard path, which is the Christic work. The Christ is born from the union of the human soul that is manufactured thanks to the creation of the 5 solar bodies, physical, vital, astral, mental, and causal bodies, and the union with the divine soul, which is the bodic body that is raised, only waiting for the true man to be formed in us, So from that union between the human and the divine, which is the perfect matrimony, the Christic fire, the Christic fire is born in the heart of the man. And the advent of the Christic fire is actually the most important event of our human life. And that intimate Christ then takes charge of all our mental, emotional, motor, instinctive, and sexual processes as the electronic Kundalini rises in the work of the second mountain. And as the Christ creates these golden bodies, because in the second mountain, those solar bodies are going to be turned into bodies of gold with the work in the suprasexuality, the Christ is going to be growing 7 by 7. When the mental body of gold is created, then the Christ will be turned 33 years old, and that is when the Christ completely incarnates in the person, because he is already prepared to do the strongest work. And that Christ is actually called the Hercules, because he has to face the 7 causal selves in hell. Since on the first mountain we obtain 71% of consciousness with that work, and when we incarnate the Christ, we have 84% of consciousness, and we must reach 100% of consciousness. So this remaining consciousness is actually trapped on the heaviest psychological defects, which are called the 7 causal selves or the 7 deadly sins. So the Christ must face those demons, and that is going to be a very, very hard psychological work. So on the second mountain, the Christ will create the bodies of gold, will continue working on sex with the partner, and now will turn the solar bodies into bodies of gold. The Christ must pay the karma of 7 existences, so there will be no rest for us in that work. Is also going to kill the 7 causal selves, is going to pay the hard karma with the so-called 8 years of job, which is a very painful disease with which all the crimes we have committed against the Holy Spirit are going to be paid. And this disease will cause a lot of suffering, but it will also help for those defects that must be eliminated to arise. The Christ also will take charge of the global teaching. And there is an aspect that will make the work of the Christ more difficult. And it is that the whole world will see him through their psychological glasses. Each person will reflect his own defects in the Christ. So, as always, no one is going to understand the Christ. That is why people will judge him. And if possible, they will seek to kill him or to attack him. So, the Christ will not comfort the moral codes or the good customs of society. The Christ is actually the truth, and the truth is always offensive to people. So really, if we had a Christ in front of us, we wouldn't recognize him. However, when the Christ completes the work, he will no longer have to feel pain or persecution. We are going to become gods, and we will not longer be tied to the loss of pain. That is like the goal that we are actually pursuing with this work on ourselves. And we must remember that the Christ must live his entire way of the cross in the very depths of our own soul. That is actually a hard path, but is the only path that is worth traveling. And actually, this has been today's lecture. as I said at the beginning, it is a hard lecture. Sorry, and next Sunday we have another hard lecture because we are going to learn about a non-identification with everyday things, and we are going to see why we always judge others. So, and that because that is something that is very important that we work on ourselves if we actually want to advance in this inner work. So this has been today's lecture. Thank you to all the people that takes the time to watch this video, and see you next Sunday. Ciao, and thank you very much.